Imagine you just climbed out of a race car at 2 a.m. on one of the most demanding circuits in the world. You've been driving for 2 hours straight in 130-degree heat inside your car. Your heart is pounding, your muscles are wrecked. And before you can even think about sleep, you got to check your blood sugar and figure out your insulin strategy for the next stint. That's a normal Saturday night for my guest today. Tyler Cooke is a professional GT driver who's raced at the 24 Hours of Spa, the 24 Hours of Nürburgring, and IMSA and GT World Challenge Europe. And he's doing all of it with type 1 diabetes since he was 11 years old. Tyler, you can find on Instagram at Tyler Cooke Racing. And I'm really excited to share this interview with you today. So here's the episode.
Guys, who was MVP of the chat?
Rob Howe! Rob freaking Howe! What were you on? We need more of that.
Hey, listeners, welcome back to Diabetics Doing Things. My guest today is Tyler Cooke. Tyler is a professional GT3 racing driver who's competed in some of the biggest endurance races on the planet, and we're going to talk about those, especially three in particular. He was also diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 11, way back in 2006, and he's been managing his glucose at 150 miles an hour plus in a fire suit at 3 a.m. for his entire racing career. Tyler, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Super pumped to talk and have some fun with this.
So we have had some conversations with drivers over the years, and we've heard some stories of drivers that are more of a traditional, we'll call it a traditional style race that maybe we're more familiar with, whether it's IndyCar, whether it's NASCAR, et cetera. I really am excited to dig into the nitty gritty of managing type 1 diabetes while being behind the wheel of a car for an extended period of time in like a 24-hour Daytona type of race. But first, let's start kind of with your diabetes story. So like take us back to 2006. You're 11 years old. Like what do you remember about that diagnosis?
Well, probably like a lot of diabetics, I remember every minute. So I remember we actually came up to North Carolina. We lived in Florida at the time. Came out to North Carolina, and I was losing a lot of weight, and it didn't look good. It didn't look healthy, and I was eating a lot. My dad said he's definitely not eating. He's pounding back food like it's going out of style. I remember getting back to Florida for middle school again after winter break, and went to school. I remember sitting in my homeroom. And I looked at my homeroom teacher, and he looked at me. He's like, "You don't look too good." And I was like, "Oh, I don't feel good." And he's like, "All right, maybe just go to the bathroom and see." And so I walk out, I go to the bathroom, ended up puking all over a girl. Lost that shot, but puked all over a girl. And I was like, "I'm so sorry." And I sprinted to the bathroom, and I proceeded to puke about 5 more times. With the school, it was as soon as you throw up, you have to go home. So my dad picks me up, and he had a pretty good idea of maybe what was going on because my dad, did a lot of studying. So takes me to the doctor, and the doctor does a finger prick. And I remember me and my dad were sitting in a room. They pulled my dad out of the room, and they said, you got to get your son to ICU now. And, if you don't take him now, he doesn't have much longer to live. My body is going into shock. My dad's emotional, frantic. And rushed me to Joe DiMaggio. They admit me. I remember getting 4 IVs put into my body just to get my body back to normal. Actually, one of them, they forgot to take the band off. So my sister walks in, very emotional from high school, knowing that I was in ICU, and she's like, "Why is his arm turning colors?" And they forgot to release the band. And I thought it was funny at the time. I was like, you know what, it's just been a day. So I was in ICU for 2 days, and then they moved me to a normal room. Where I was in there for another 5 days. I still remember me and my dad would always walk outside to go get some fresh air with all the IVs. I remember like walking out there, and I saw a kid eating like chocolate mousse, like on the painting on the wall, and I started crying. And he's like, "Why are you crying?" I was like, "Because I can't get the chocolate mousse at Epcot in France anymore. I'm so disappointed in that." He's like, "You just got a life-altering disease, and you're worried about the France chocolate mousse." I was like, "Yes." I was like, I love that. Like, I absolutely love that stuff. And, so I went there, got to go home for a week, and then took a year off racing. We had to figure out what normal was and how, big change to the family and big change to everybody. And
well, let's talk about that because you're 11 years old at the time. So like taking a year off when you're 11 years old to someone who's not really plugged into the racing community may not seem like a big deal, but like racing is in your family and has been what you wanted to do since you were very little. So like tell us a little bit about like how you got started in racing.
So I actually got started in racing when I was 3 years old. My dad built me a go-kart from scratch in our garage, and I still have that go-kart to this day. I'm restoring it. I want to bring it back to life, and it's just a memory with him. And so I started it when I was 3, and my grandfather had a late model team that Dave Rudiman borrowed his car. Rusty Wallace drove his car for a race. Eric Amarola drove his car for a race. So it was really cool. I got to maybe meet those guys. I was a little young to remember that, but it was definitely cool when my grandfather told me those stories. And so I would get out of school. My dad would get off work. He worked as a mechanic at Cadillac for a long time. And we'd go to the shop and we'd help my grandfather with the car. I could do anything. I could just take the wheels off, make vroom vroom noises in the seat, but I felt like I was just a part of it. And then so I went into go-kart racing when I was about 9 years old. Started at the later part of it. A lot of kids start when they're 6, 7 years old. And, it's just every year you're developing, just like you're developing in school. So every year does matter and every year does count. And taking that year off, obviously was a big deal, but it was something that was needed because it's life altering. It's a full different change of a life. And last thing you want is to rush back into something and you don't know why you're shaking in the go-kart. It's because of a low sugar. And I actually had that happen once where I got into a crash in turn 1 and a kid like drove over me on the go-kart. And I remember he was sitting on top of me, so I like shoved him off. And for the rest of the 18 lap race, I was shaking, and I thought I was just nervous. And I think I finished like 5th or something like that. I come back in the pits, and I go back to our pit area, and I check my blood sugar, and I'm 42. And I was like, oh wow, like I actually went low. And that, it was years after I got diagnosed, but it's always a learning thing. We're always learning our bodies.
Well, I was gonna say too, like at that point, maybe 2008, 2009 timeframe. So you've been diagnosed a couple of years. There's still not like a continuous glucose monitor or a system where you can have somebody in the pit or you can have something on your dash where you're monitoring your sugar. So you're just kind of going off vibes at that point.
Yeah, and you had to, yeah, I mean, a lot of diabetics know that you'd have to feel, oh, I'm tired. That must mean I'm high, or I'm getting like jittery. I would start talking a lot, or like my dad would have to go like, just please stop talking for a second, and I'm just like,
Is
I
that
got a lot to
when
talk.
you're low, you start to talk a lot?
Yeah, I was like freaking Bugs Bunny trying to like run the marathons. I was going, and then my dad started to realize like you're going low. Like here's a little bit of sugar. I'd get a Reese's cup. Which is always great. Because me
Yeah,
and my dad.
those medicinal Reese's is like top tier.
Oh,
It's like,
it's
hey,
like
sorry, I gotta have this candy to save my life.
it's better than Michelin star restaurants when you get a Reese's cup when you're a little low. It's just hits right.
That dopamine hit of like your brain's like, yes, we're safe now. Now eat this, enjoy this chocolate and peanut butter. I want to talk about before we move on more towards your professional career. You shared as a an ambassador for Breakthrough T1D throughout your life, being open about being bullied about your diabetes as a kid or at school. Tell us a little bit about that. And I think that's something that a lot of people either can relate to or are afraid of, whether it's a person with diabetes or a caregiver. Tell us a little bit about that and kind of how it shaped your relationship with diabetes.
Well, kids can be kids. And when kids
Yeah.
don't know something, they can be a little on the harsher side of things. So kids cannot figure out, like, I remember going to middle school and I always had to bring like tofu chicken that my mom made me and like green beans because my family wanted me on a pretty strict diet because at the time we knew that 1 fast, 10 slow. And if that didn't work, I couldn't have that food. Before we didn't really learn about counting carbs. So it was pretty much just that. So it was like if he ran high, that food's gone. And so we got down to like certain foods I could eat with that. And I'd bring it to school and, all the kids look at me like, what's this weirdo eating? Like we're having like school lunches or,
Sure.
sandwiches, stuff that I just couldn't have. And at the
And
time,
middle school kids are like experts at pointing out anything different and laughing about it.
yeah, they really are. And I mean, they were my nutritionists as well because they were just telling me like what I was eating was so stupid. And I was like, I know, thank you. And, if there was like a birthday party, I would have to go like, no, I'm sorry, I can't have cake. And then they would look at me weird and kind of sometimes make fun of me of like, oh, well, you can't have cake. And, it did get to me. I remember going back to my family a few times or my parents going like, what is wrong with me? Like, why can't I be like these kids? And, they definitely sat me down a few times when I was younger, like while I was crying. I remember I went out trick-or-treating. My dad really did not want me to go trick-or-treating. And I went trick-or-treating and I got a bunch of candy and I was so excited. And my dad's like, I have to take this. You can't have this, because again, before we knew about counting carbs or anything. So he just thought that is the right thing for us to do. And so I remember him taking it and he borderline cried, taking it because he could see my excitement. And, then you're dealing with kids that don't understand that and they're going to go like, it's cooler to make fun of somebody than it is to understand because you're at the age where you're developing nonstop.
Yeah,
It's
your
not
brain is fully not developed.
no, and it's definitely not a fault. Like I look back at it now, it was tough, but it made me a stronger person. And then I remember, getting older, my 17, 18, 19, started dating. I would both would think I had a bathroom problem because I would constantly go to the bathroom and go do insulin for like what we were eating, what we were doing, or anything. And I just realized I was like, if this girl doesn't like me because I'm a diabetic, this is just never going to work. I can't hide this.
Right.
So, I mean, I just started going on dates, and I would just go, you know what? I have to do a shot. Like we're having cake right here. And they respected that more because I was more open and honest about it. Because like it was like, oh, okay, like I understand what you're doing, like what you have to go through. But then back to the bullying part of it, it's just kids being kids. And like, I never steer away from who you are because something that I love is I think type 1 diabetics are actually cooler people because we get to have little computers on us to feed us stuff. I mean, how many people get to say that? We get
Right.
computers.
Well, I think too, like even just digging into that more, but every carb, you know how every meal has affected you for going on 21 years, right? So I think a lot of people, it is a burden, sure. And I think a lot of people will really resonate with the story of your dad, like feeling really guilty when he took your candy away, but he didn't have the knowledge to help you enjoy that at that time. And, I think that's one of the things where wherever you are in your diabetes journey, that's that's where you are, and you will get better at it. It's like there's this idea of an infinite ladder. So no matter where you are, there's somebody ahead of you and there's somebody behind you. That's why I'm been so fortunate to learn from other people in the community who've tried things, or like having somebody like yourself, because maybe somebody or a parent is out there listening and they want to get their kid into kart racing and they don't know where to start. And now they know that you've done this with type 1 diabetes, and they have a dream of being a professional driver. These are all those things where I just think that having that example can really help someone, and, being willing to share it, especially that it wasn't always good. I think we have this idea where I see that photo behind you, like you're in winner's circle, checkered flag, there's confetti dropping all around you. Like we just assume it was always like that. And so to hear you say, I was going to the bathroom to give my injections, I had to make a decision to be open and upfront about my diabetes. So I guess like, how did you decide that you were going to kind of be more public and be an example, even after you experienced that bullying and that resistance or those negative interactions early on?
Well, for a bit, I was scared to talk about it. I did try to hide it. I thought I was going to lose opportunities by being that. I thought, I was going to lose people in my life, because they would look at this weirdo that has to take injections. And it was mostly just in my head, and so it was more or less, hey, I am a type 1 diabetic and there's nothing I'm going to be able to change about that. Hell, at this point, I think it's weird if I don't give myself insulin because I've actually thought about as we keep going down the road of developing a cure. I'm like, I don't know if that does ever come out, like, while I'm still alive, I'm like, I don't know how that would go if I don't have to do anything. It'd be weird. Like, it'd be very weird.
You're the second person I've talked to recently who brought up this idea where the cure comes out. He was saying that like he wants to make sure that he's in a position to be eligible to get it. So he's
Yeah.
like, that's his motivation for taking care of himself today, is that eventually, based on what we're seeing now with these clinical trials where we're having tremendous success getting people with diabetes off of insulin and in a sustainable way with fewer side effects. He wants to be able to get that stuff. And so it's like now it's like counting carbs, taking insulin, exercise, whatever is like potentially framing that as a gateway to potentially a life down the road where that doesn't have to be part of your life.
Yeah, and I mean, it is so cool what we're doing, and it's so cool to see the advancements we're having. And I'm completely in agreement with that. Hey, I just want to stay healthy just in case it doesn't happen. I want to
Sure.
just be a healthy person, live into my 90s, hopefully triple digits. But, if it does happen, I agree with that. Being able where your body's not damaged that much. At the end of the day, you see where everybody says be 120, be 130, or be even lower than that. That's really hard. It's a big challenge, and it's
Right.
almost like a medical practice because you're practicing to see. I've had, I eat IQ bars in the morning, and I've had sometimes with IQ bars, I give myself barely any insulin, and they, will drop me. And then I'll have an IQ bar, and then it'll spike me. But I've given myself a little bit more insulin, and it's just you don't know why it's doing that. Everybody in the community knows when you get sick, when you have surgery, it is so hard to get that blood sugar out of the 200s. 2 to 300s because your body's so focused on what got damaged instead of, kind of focusing on the
Yeah.
sugar. And it's difficult, but again, it makes us cool. We get to know like more things about how our body's doing that than the most humans can. And I do love how Dexcom made the Stello, where a normal human can kind of track and see things. Like I would really love more people to be on that because you just don't know how your body's reacting.
Well, yeah, and I think initially there's a lot of maybe resistance to that in the type 1 community because like, for most people who have normal functioning pancreases and like no metabolic disease, you're not going to see a whole lot from that. But if we read the numbers, there's like 100 million people in the United States living with prediabetes. So what better way for them to discover that than to, an over the counter without a prescription, trial like a Stelo or a Lingo where they can get that and see what's going on in their body or at least like rule out what's going on. Because, some of those things, they're having symptoms, they're like your dad, they're doing Google searches, they're talking to AI and they're like, hey, what's going on in my body? I do want to go back to what you've been saying about feeling cooler. For me, you're a little younger than me. So guys my age, in their late 30s, all of a sudden start to be like, oh, well, I should probably take better care of myself because I'm at risk for heart attack or I'm at risk for whatever. And so I'm like, yeah, dude, I've literally counted every single carb I've eaten for 21 years. I've literally get 3 labs done every year to track to see how I'm doing. And so it's interesting to be like, it actually is an advantage for me in some ways, obviously like not in all the day-to-day inconveniences and like the costs and the mental burden and all those things, but I know what's going on in my body. I don't have to go get caught up. I've been managing this for a long time. And I look at that as an advantage long term.
Yeah, I mean, you think about how many people really don't even go to the doctor,
Yeah.
and we have to go to the doctor, and yeah, it does have the burden because sometimes you don't get the best news when you go to the doctor. A1C might be a little high, and I do love that Dexcom can keep that tracked, so you can kind of see, before you even get to the doctor where your A1C is going to be. But it is cool that we always have to get labs done so we can see what the rest of our body, like you said, is doing. So it just kind of keeps us healthier. I mean, everything has a side effect when it comes to life. And I do think like we do have some side effects. We do have some issues that we could potentially get down the road, but there's so many advancements now to help us prevent those issues. And, there's nobody that's a perfect 100% healthy. Everybody has something
Yeah.
that is a little problem. We just get the cool label on it, which makes us cooler.
Well, if you're listening and you're like us, you're a dude in your 30s, go to the doctor. There's no like punishment. They don't like they don't judge you or grade you negatively. Okay, but let's shift gears a little bit because I want to talk about racing, and I know the audience wants to hear, from a GT racer what it's like. And so I'd love for you to paint a picture. I think for better and worse, I know the racing community didn't necessarily like it, but the F1 movie, we got to see the 24-hour Daytona at the beginning of that movie, GT3 racing. For those who are listening who don't know much about GT racing, like what can you do to paint a picture of them for like their 24 hours of Spa, like the biggest GT3 race in the world? Like what's it like in that race?
It's so cool. It's always been a dream of mine, and it was so cool being 16 years old, graduating high school half a year early and getting to go pursue my dream. Like me and the principal made a deal, and I had to pass all these classes. He's like, once you pass those classes, you're free. And I did. But GT racing, a lot of people don't really know what it is because of F1, IndyCar, NASCAR. Like, those are all great big series. Like Max Verstappen raced GT3 car over the weekend at Nürburgring. Some of the most fun he's ever had. Lance Stroll, Aston Martin F1 driver, raced GT3 car in France a couple weeks ago because F1 had this downtime. And a lot of those guys are actually kind of venturing into the GT3 platform. So when you come over here, it's a series called IMSA, or SRO America, and IMSA, IMSA, has these things called GTP hypercars. So they're pretty much an F1 car with fenders all the way down to GT3. So it makes the racing really cool, like 24 hours Daytona, when, hypercar is going by a GT3 car about 25 miles an hour faster. And, they're trying to mix up in their battle, and they have GT cars like me that are in the middle, but we're trying to mix up our own battle, and it usually gets very entertaining. A lot of contact happens, but it's 24 hours of kind of like a family. Like all the fans become a family, and it's really cool. It's like a very interactive platform. So in sports car racing, one single ticket gets you every single place in the paddock. Besides pit road, you cannot go to pit road, and Daytona you can't go into the garages. But you can get everywhere else with one single ticket. And GT3 cars look like your regular street cars, but wider, cooler, kind of beefier, sometimes louder. But, if you look at like a BMW M4 or like what I've raced, a Lamborghini, it looks very similar to that street car, but then if you put it next to the street car, it's a lot wider. And then the inside of it's all carbon fiber. Our steering wheels have about, 30 or 40 buttons on them, to change different things. Might be 15 to 30. We'll do that. We'll be on the safer side. And then the center console has a bunch more buttons, and it just allows us to make changes throughout the whole entire time. So a lot of people think we're just sitting in the car nonstop. We have a little computer inside the car. We're flipping through pages. We're trying to update the team, what the car is doing. The car will most of the time have like a cell phone tower in it. So it's beaming a signal back to the team so the team can see live. Depends on the series. Some series don't allow that, but it allows the team to see live what's going on with the car. So if you're a McLaren fanatic and you love the 720, you can go see the big boy, the race car race out there. But the coolest thing about sports car racing is all those people can drive their cars to the racetrack, and there's corrals. You got BMW corral, you got Porsche corral, you got Lamborghini corral. So you actually get to be a part of that family, and they'll usually cater some food for you and all that. But then it's the accessibility. As a little kid, you can walk right up to the race car, and a lot of the guys in hypercar are either ex-F1 drivers, F1 reserve drivers, IndyCar drivers. Like, when you actually look at the paddock, it's cool, and it's growing more and more, and that's what I love to see. But if you're a big car person, you actually want to see pretty much what the street car looks like in racing form, it's probably the best thing you can ever go do for an affordable price. It's, fairly affordable to go.
Well, and like you said, one ticket gets you wherever you want to go. Like, if you're going to an F1 race, like it's going to be tiered based on how much you pay, and the top tier is going to be extremely, extremely expensive. So this is just your basic entry level, gets you wherever you want to go, and the racing is only just like one step below.
Well, and I mean, the
And
racing,
different totally as well.
well, and that's the thing. All of us in sports car world is trying to make, what sports car looks like the same level. And that's why I love that Verstappen came and did the Nürburgring, because he was like, man, this is wild. Like, this is super cool. And then if you look at all the advancements, you have in hypercar, you have Porsche. So, and the cool thing about sports car racing is a lot of the advancements that happen in the race car get passed down to the street cars in years afterwards. And that's the only form of racing that happens. So, like, why does the BMW have that big front grille? Because the race car needed it. So they had to create a street car that actually resembled the race car, so that the race car could be what it needs to be. And probably since I started in sports car racing, now the series has grown all around the world. All of them have grown a ton more, and it just keeps growing, and the competition keeps getting harder. It is incredible to see where it has, like, Daytona is getting a few 100,000 fans per race now. When the Rolex 24 comes in, Sebring, and it's USA Today. I think it was USA Today on IMSA's website. The 12-hour Sebring is ranked number 2, and the Petite Le Mans is ranked number 4, and the United States Grand Prix was ranked number 8, and that's the F1 race. And I was just blown away when I saw that, because I was like, man, the sports car racing is actually the only thing that was number 1 is the Indy 500, and that's a good old American race. So I was just, it's really cool to see the sports car racing moving its way up there, where the attendance is getting there.
And continuing to grow. I think, like you said, the participation of people like Verstappen and, like, getting interest throughout is really exciting. I want to talk a little bit about you mentioned more buttons on the dashboard, more buttons on the steering wheel. Do you have a Dexcom button? Do you have a CGM button? What does that look like? How has CGM changed your race management strategy? Like, does your crew have access to your numbers? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah, I'll share with the crew my Dexcom, like the Clarity app, for a lot of them to see it. Just in case, like, blood sugar goes low, I have a Gatorade bottle that sits in the car. It's a special button that allowed me to get some Gatorade in my system, or some sort of sugar. A lot of times we're doing like specialized drinks to keep the energy up, and sometimes too much sugar can bring the energy down, especially when you need as much as you can. So it might be like a little bit of sugar mixed in with some caffeine, just to kind of bring like that good dose in. But yeah, a lot of times I'll try to get a special button in the car, because race cars sometimes have some dead buttons that can be programmed into something, and I'll try to get that. I haven't got to race with the Omnipod yet, so I'm looking forward to trying that, and trying to see what that can do.
Along those lines, like, sometimes the temperatures in the cockpit can be really hot, like 130 degrees, like in the summertime, and you might be wearing a suit, right? So, like, how does that affect whether it's glucose or hydration or insulin absorption? Like, how do you plan for those types of scenarios?
Well, you build up the week before, you build up a lot of hydration, because you can lose, sometimes 5-7 pounds of water weight just by running a stint. So you try to build up the week before to make sure your body's just hydrated, the cells are hydrated. And then a lot of times because, you're in the car, you're going through a lot of things, your blood sugar will actually run up sometimes. And there's sometimes I don't know why, but I'll be sitting at 220 and I've barely eaten anything and I've given myself the proper insulin, but it's almost like the adrenaline kicks in and everything starts kicking in. Your blood sugar just sits up here.
Adrenaline, cortisol, you're sitting down, like the whole thing, right?
Yeah, and I mean, your heart's beating like crazy because, like, I wear a Whoop, and you can get, a motorsports tab in the Whoop. Your heart's sitting up at 170, so you think that you should technically be going down, but I think, because we're just geared up with so much adrenaline while we're doing it, that the adrenaline just kind of keeps it, a little bit above normal.
I'm glad you brought up the Whoop because I saw it earlier. What's your strain look like on, let's say, like a practice run or like, you're a day out at the track versus a race? Like, what's the difference or what's the delta for like let's say like a 3-hour stint? Like, what are you going to log on your Whoop at that point?
For a 3-hour stint, you'll typically probably get to about a 15 on
Okay.
strain. Practice, you'll do like a 5, a 4, because, a practice run, you'll go out for a few laps, you'll come back in, do some adjustments, go back out for a few laps, because practice, you're not necessarily just trying to make laps to learn the track, you're just trying to make laps to get the car adapted. And then,
Sure.
we're
Make the
dealing with,
changes.
we're dealing with 3 to 4 drivers, sometimes for the endurance races, or 2 drivers for the sprint. So you got to get the other guy in there, you got to get all the drivers to run through it. And then we're also, we try to change drivers in about 20, 21 seconds. So while tires are coming off, fuel's going in, drivers get changed. So that's what kind of makes sports car racing a little bit more fun, is when you watch a pit stop, it's not just tires and fuel. It's, a lot of things happening at one time, and the whole crew has to be in sync.
So like for you, let's just walk it through. Like at a 24-hour race, so you're sitting, like, say you're at the Rolex Daytona. Your stint might be like you might have to wake up in the middle of the night and do a stint. How are you preparing your glucose during those types of styles of race?
Well, I'll tell you, the Omnipod's made it a lot easier. Just because they can just bolus a little bit. You don't have to worry about the slow acting, what I always had trouble with, because, that thing's lasting for 12 to 24 hours.
Right.
And we started to do like a little bit of slow in the morning and a little bit of slow at night. And so the problem is when the slow is engaging pretty hard, then you have to start giving yourself some fast, and you're trying to eat like a snack. Like typically I'll try to eat an IQ bar or a protein shake, just trying to get some protein in my system, and, just trying to keep the muscles, from fatiguing too much. And I give myself a little bit of fast insulin, thinking, okay, it has 40 grams of carb in it, so let me just dial it to 4. And then the slow kicked in pretty hard too, and next thing you know, I'm plummeting, and now I got to hit the Gatorade button. That's always, and Omnipod's done a great job when it comes to making just everything so much easier. Everybody on the Omnipod could probably say the same thing. It's just so easy, having it just do everything for you. Obviously, you need a bolus when you have to eat something, but, it's just made getting into a race car a lot easier than what it used to be.
And I want to talk a little bit about this for those who are either driving a car, listening to the podcast, or have never been in a competitive racing environment. I'll share. I got to ride in a couple of GT cars a few years ago during just like a fun run on a track, and I was shooting some photos, and it was the most intense time I've ever had in the passenger seat of a car. Like the interior was all stripped down, obviously, like it was, racing harness and helmet, and like I was being thrown around like crazy, and it wasn't even like full racing conditions, right? So how do you prepare yourself physically to log a 15 to 18 on your Whoop strain during a race? Like what kind of preparation do you have to do for that?
I actually go to a training facility here, that specializes in driving, and we do many different things there. We wear heart rate monitors. We try to keep the heart in 90% range for, say, 10 minutes. And then maybe like the next month, it is keeping the heart between 80 to 90 for 10 minutes. And it's also maybe doing a whole entire AMRAP with the heart between 80 and 90, because then it adapts your muscles to what your heart's
Sure.
doing. So a lot of times that's what the training facility does, is they try to get our muscles to adapt to what they think our heart rate's going to be in the race car. So we do a lot of work with our hearts, training our muscles to be in sync with the heart. And because you felt it's a high G load, we do special work on our necks. We'll just have neck day, where we're lifting weights with our neck, we're
Never
pulling
skip
bands.
neck
Or
day. Never skip
no,
neck day. I've always said that.
yeah, exactly. I mean, leg day you can skip, but no, neck day is really important. Leg day is also important because in a modern day GT3 car, you're 1,200 pounds and more on the brake pedal, and if any consolation, if you brake really hard on a street car, you're probably about 500 pounds. So
Hmm.
just think about that much more pressure that you have to put into a race car. So you have to make sure the body can work, and your heart's never going to sit down here while you're in a race. Your heart's always going to sit up there. So they don't really want us to work out down here. They try to get the heart going. Like, before this call, I just got back from training, just, working out a few different things just to make sure that you're always ready to get back in that race car.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. I think like the correlations between endurance training for like ultra marathoners, for example, or for any other kind of like high intensity interval where you've got to be at a certain heart rate training and you're training your muscles to operate at this level and kind of optimizing it according to your heart rate zones. That's really fascinating. I think like I don't know. I imagine your average person is probably not thinking that how dialed in drivers are to their muscles and their heart rate zones, like what's going on while they're behind the wheel.
Well, and I mean, you've touched on the G load, it's a high G load. You're sitting in a full containment seat. You're pretty strapped in there, so your body's not able to move. You don't really get air conditioning. They do allow fans for air to blow in, but if it's a 100-degree race, you're pretty much just getting 100-degree air blowing in your face. It's a sealed car, so sometimes you get a little window that you can open up to try to get some hot air out of it, but it's not abnormal for us to lose a lot of weight. I remember a race I had in New York. I got out of the car, my voice was shaking. I remember across checker flag, adrenaline was done. Adrenaline finally wore off. I drove all the way to second place. And I remember like calling on the radio to the team. I was like, I can't hold the steering wheel. I can't do anything. I'm like, my body just went numb. And it was just because of the heat, the sheer
Mm.
exhaustion, my body just went into over exhaustion. And, somehow my blood sugar stayed at 120 the whole entire time. It was great. But like, that was a miracle. But
Well,
yeah, the exhaustion level is high.
well, I was gonna say like that adrenaline and that cortisol is like protecting you really from like, and then when when you pass the checkered flag, you release that like adrenaline and cortisol, and your body's like, no, no, dude, we need to go to sleep. We're done.
Well, I remember like the team guys are coming over, putting ice down my suit. They were putting water bottles onto my neck. They dumped a whole jug of water, like ice water, on me just to cool my body down because they could actually feel how hot I was.
Hmm.
Just because the BMW is a turbo car, so the turbos even run hotter than a naturally aspirated. So the interior of that car was getting so hot. That car had an AC that under brakes it would run an AC. And with about 45 minutes to go, the crew chief came on saying, if you turn off the AC, there's a chance we're going to win this, because the AC was taking some power away from
Power,
getting off
right?
the corner. So I turned the AC off. I was like, I want to win this, and drove to second. Did not have enough for the leading car. And yeah, I felt it after that checker flag. And then the trophies I showed up there is a solid glass trophy, weighs a ton. And we're all on the podium. They're like, hey, you got to put it up. And I was like, it's going to be down here. I can't put it up. I'm exhausted.
Man, I love that story. I think. Do you have a favorite racing and diabetes story, or like one that comes to mind, or like a story that you always tell?
I do love that picture that you saw behind. That was actually the first win for the BMW in North America IMSA competition. All year we were struggling, not really able to perform to the level that we thought. It was a new car. We were getting good podiums, but there's just nuances with the car that we were learning, the team was learning. And so we were always in the points battle. We were always doing well. But it wasn't, where we actually thought we were going to be. And so that happened. We actually were a whole straightaway ahead of the field, and able to win it. And I remember I was crying, my team owner was crying, my mom was crying. I did the whole lap in tears and coming to the checker flag. But it's just an emotional win because you just realize how much heart there is in it. And, you have guys working at the shop, you have guys working at the track, you have so much personnel to make that race car hit the racetrack. And that's what a lot of people also forget. I've also said this too, like, there's so many more people behind the scenes, and you see the driver, you go, oh man, I'm a big fan of Tyler Cooke. I'm a big fan of Connor Daly. I'm a big fan of any driver, but you forget about the guys that are behind the scenes actually make that race car go on the racetrack.
Yeah, so many
And
people behind the scenes that make that car from production to data and testing and pit crew and all that. It's how many people work on your race team?
I think per car it's about 10, 15. So it's just, you have specialized guys. You have specialized guys that are doing data. You got tire guys, you got shock guys, you got just, guys that have to be dedicated to that part of the car because there's so many moving parts. You can't have one guy that is working on all of it because, by the time he gets to the end thing, the team that has all the personnel are already done and they've already been on the racetrack a few times.
It's kind of like a football team. It's like the quarterbacks who everybody sees and talks about, but everybody's special teams, offensive line, defensive line that go into that. For fans or people who are interested, obviously, like we want to support you, but do you have a favorite driver or somebody if they have kids who want to dream of racing, like who's somebody they should watch?
There's a couple. I always root for a fellow T1D, Connor Daly, running the Indy 500 this weekend. It's really cool when he takes a lead at the Indy 500. That place just goes crazy. I mean, they're screaming for him, and he is a very genuine, nice person, and a very good driver too. He's raced everywhere. He's raced all over the world. And then another guy that I've gotten to know, Scott McLaughlin, and he's an IndyCar driver as well. Just again, a very genuine person. He has, I think it's called Locked In on YouTube. Is his YouTube thing. And he's just, he just shows you like kind of be yourself. You can just be yourself. People will love you. And if I could say maybe a third guy, I know I probably wasn't supposed to say three, but the third guy would probably be Connor D. Flippy, who's a really, really good buddy of mine. He just ran the Nürburgring over the weekend. He won the Rolex 24 this year. Worked really hard. He was staying in tents at the racetrack, to make sure he got to race. He worked himself to get into a BMW factory position, and he's doing a great job. And he's like a brother when you get to know him, where he just is a very genuine, sincere person. And him and I will just talk about random stuff on the phone and catch up. And it's kind of nice, like when you have people like that around you.
Definitely. Okay, I want to ask you one thing. We talked about the year off that you took when you were younger after you were diagnosed, away from the thing that you love to do, things you're still doing. If you can go back and tell, 11-year-old Tyler sitting at home, sidelined, newly diagnosed, like what would you tell yourself?
Let the process happen. Give things time. It's really easy to want to rush things. Right? You always think that, especially with social media nowadays, you see, a 13-year-old star on TV, or you see like, an influencer that's 17, 16 years old or 30 years old. And you think, I have to be that person. And maybe that's not the calling you were supposed to have. Trust me, especially in the racing world, it's easy to try to relate to other drivers, especially if another driver wins in front of you or something. And it's really easy to beat yourself down, but it's just trusting that the process is going to be good, because most of the time it is going to be good, and just always working at it. Never give up on yourself, and never let anybody say that you can't do it, because everybody has a chance to do something. It's about what you want to make of it to make it happen, and I mean, look what you've done with your podcast. Like, your podcast has grown to what it is today because you've worked so hard at it, and now you have a really cool following, and you're able to spread a really great message around. And, you would probably ask your 11-year-old self too, would I have a podcast that's this big when I'm this age? And, you could tell him that.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it, I think, and thank you. It's funny, you don't think from a race car driver that the advice would be take it slow, like let the journey unfold, like trust the process. Because yeah, you're right. Comparison, it's so easy to make yourself upset or make yourself think that you're supposed to be in a place that you're not yet. It's really easy to think that way. But man, something I've been talking a lot about recently is just momentum. And I wrote this down and I've been revisiting it on a regular basis. Momentum is so much more important than ability or quality. I think we all often can tell ourselves a story like I'm not good enough, or I don't have what it takes, or this person's better than me. But all you got to do is stack those days and like continue to work. The story you shared about your friend who's like sleeping in tents to make something happen and is now like winning a huge race, and has a big responsibility. If you just read that he won the race, you wouldn't see that other stuff. There's 10 years to make an overnight success, and all of the encouraging, inspirational quotes.
Yeah. And I mean, you can rush the process, right? And then you can fail faster
Mm.
instead of, like in racing, right? If you didn't start in a Spec Miata, which is a lot of times like a great car for people to start in, it's a 1991 to 2004 Mazda Miata. If you're looking at getting in racing, great place to start. Next place is a Spec MX-5. Those are just two really good places to learn your racecraft and learn a lot of things at a very lower price. But say you went from Spec Miata to GT3, Well, there are many steps in between that you should have taken, and it's a completely different car. One has 650 horsepower, one has 110. And, if you didn't trust that process to get yourself all the way through there, by the time you got to the GT3, if you did the process, you got to the GT3, you're successful. You're winning. If you just go from Spec Miata to GT3, you're out within a race. You're going back on the couch and, you're regretting the decision you made.
Can't cheat the grind, man. Well, Tyler, man, thank you for your time and for all you do to advocate for people with diabetes on the track and off. And I really appreciate this interview, man. And I can't wait to get it published.
Thank you for having me.